Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Andre Simons, Director in Control Risks Crisis and Security Consulting Practice, focusing on workplace violence, active shooter, and life safety threats, specializing in providing critical incident threat assessments, crisis response, and risk mitigation strategies. He's joining me to discuss best practices for employers to safely get their teams back to work. Andre, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks very much, Jill. Privileged to be here with you.
All right, Andre, let's talk about the different types of stressors that employees are facing as a result of COVID-19.
Sure, Jill. It's kind of hard to imagine a time when there's been such a perfect storm of personal and professional stressors. There's concerns, obviously, for your own health, but one of the main stressors can be the health or concern of safety for a loved one as well. Combine that with things like childcare or elder care. The return to work scenario just becomes, in many ways, fraught with peril with all of these stressors swirling around for employees.
Let's talk about some of the trends of workplace violence.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think what we're seeing, obviously on the retail front, you're seeing in social media many examples of employees who are faced with enforcing mask requirements, and they're running up squarely against individuals who don't want to wear masks. So I think we're seeing that type in the retail sector that's shaping up, unfortunately, and promises to continue being a challenge. You're also seeing problematic terminations, especially in the face of mass layoffs or reductions in force. I think we're going to see many more problematic terminations, especially when the stakes are so high and the job market is looking as depressed as it is. And then domestic and intimate partner violence. By some accounts, those are on the rise by about 40%. That inevitably will spill into the workplace. And unfortunately, with return to work, we think we'll see more of that happening.
Andre, it's interesting when we talk about returning everybody back to work, the first thought is the economy. We have to get the economy firing on all cylinders again. It always comes back to money, but nobody has put mental health at the forefront of all this. And you're right, we have to retrain ourselves to go back to commuting, to go back to childcare. It's going to be an interesting process of how this all works. So what are some of your primary concerns around COVID-19?
Yeah, I think when we're talking in the lens of workplace violence in particular, we can't underestimate the impact of stressors. Those types of stressors can really start to wear down coping mechanisms, wear down resiliency, really impact the morale and the mental wellness of an employee workforce. Now, there's a great, unfortunately, lots of research that shows that there's a correlation between stressors and violence, intimate partner violence, workplace violence. So I think as employers, as organizations, we need to be very aware that as the employees return to work with all of these different stressors that are swirling on in their lives, if violence is something they're contemplating, it's time for some extraordinary interventions to make sure that an employee doesn't feel like that's their final alternative.
What are some strategies to return back to work safely in the short term, and then, of course, manage workplace violence going forward?
We're recommending certainly that de-escalation techniques be embraced by employers, by frontline supervisors, by HR personnel, by people who have to, unfortunately, deliver bad news, whether it's termination notifications or poor performance appraisals, transfers, or repositioning. It's really important for de-escalation techniques to help mitigate the impact. Things like active listening skills, empathy, rapport building. Those are basic skills, but can really oftentimes help mute the impact of that bad news on somebody who's already dealing with stressors. Another thing that we'd recommend would be threat management or workplace violence prevention teams. Having multidisciplinary teams, usually with security, HR, and legal, to help navigate stressors, to help individuals who appear to be on a trajectory to violence, we think is just a crucial step for organizations to embrace.
Andre, let me throw another question at you. How could an HR manager, someone in position of authority, identify someone who appears to be on this track? What are some of those signs that you would look for?
Yeah, we're looking for concerning behaviors, right? Those indicators that suggest a person is contemplating or planning for an act of violence. Would suggest that in 2018, when I was with the FBI, we did a study on the pre-attack behaviors of active shooters. And we
Hmm.
found that active shooters in those studies had displayed 4 to 5 concerning behaviors that others had observed. Things like decrease in their quality of thinking or in their quality of communication. Leakage, which would be small comments that were ominous and frightening. Work performance issues, and sometimes flare-ups with threats and confrontations. Lots of different warning signs. And the key is if you see something, you obviously have to say something to a person in authority.
Are there techniques, or is there a way for someone who is going down this path? Can you walk them back in, or is there success in that?
Yeah, unfortunately, we oftentimes hear about the attacks that have been completed, but
Hmm.
there are many, many attacks that are thwarted, and it's usually through good threat assessment and threat management, where there's an intervention. Oftentimes, that involves a caretaking component. The individual gets some help through EAP or through human resources. Maybe they're able to go through arbitration or find a non-violent but legally sanctioned way of solving their issue and resolving their grievance. Many different success stories, and I'm sure every organization is aware of them and has them. It's a good thing to remind, though, I think all of your viewers here, that these types of incidents can be detected and can be thwarted before they happen.
All right, well, that certainly is encouraging. Andre, thanks so much for the insight and for joining me on Trade Talks.
Jill, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, you got it, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.